Let's talk a little bit about focus. When I say the word focus, I mean removing your ability to be so distracted. It means getting into deeper work, being able to concentrate more deeply, and just getting overall more stuff done in the time that you have available. So focus has a number of different components, and there are some things that I see students trip up on very commonly, which I think it's extremely important that we address right now. So one of the first things is that in order for us to improve our focus, as a basic prerequisite, we actually need to get enough sleep. So I always say that we should protect our sleep at all costs. And the reason that we want to protect our sleep is not just because it has a huge impact on our focus, it has an enormous impact on our levels of energy, and it also has an impact on something that's called sleep-dependent memory consolidation. So sleep-dependent memory consolidation basically means that when you first learn something, you need to go to sleep for that information to go into another part of our brain where we can then use the information. So if we didn't have sleep-dependent memory consolidation, a lot of, not everything, but a lot of what we learn, we wouldn't be able to actually apply it in the practice, in our exams, which means that we would spend all of this time studying, but that memory of studying and the information that we learned would be trapped and locked away in a part of our brain that we're not able to access, or it's very difficult to access. So what sleep does is it takes that memory and it puts it in different parts of our brain so that we are able to use it much more easily. So sleep-dependent memory consolidation is extremely important, and this is one of the reasons why even when you're super stressed, you need to sleep, because otherwise you are not only spending a lot of time studying, you're not even going to be able to use the information that you studied because it's trapped in your brain. I mean, how sad is that to have all of that time spent on studying and not even be able to use it? So sleep-dependent memory consolidation is very important. So not only is that an aspect of what sleep contributes to, but overall, when we're talking about focus, focus is contributed by a lot of different components. If we're feeling particularly cruddy on a certain day, we're just not going to be able to focus as intently. So our emotion and our mood plays into our focus. The amount of energy that we have, how tired we are, apart from sleep-dependent memory consolidation, just how tired we are from how much sleep we got is going to affect our ability to focus. Potentially the environment that we're in, the amount of distractions that are around us. There are a lot of things that contribute to this thing that we call focus, and sleep influences a lot of these different aspects. So people are very blasé about sleep. They say, oh, like just get a little bit of sleep and just hustle the rest of your day, 4 hours of sleep and wake up super early and just every single day spent maximum. Sleep is for the weak, How many of you have heard people say that before? Sleep is for the weak. When I was in later high school and early university, I said that a lot and I truly believed it. And I was honestly clearly not that smart for thinking it so deeply, because sleep is not for the weak. Sleep is for the smart. When you compromise on sleep, you compromise on so many other aspects that it's just never really worth it. So now, after having made years of mistakes, I know that when you sacrifice on sleep, you're sacrificing on not just your studying and your learning, but even just your quality of overall life on a day-to-day basis. So always protect your sleep. Don't be some kind of blind diehard who is saying sleep is for the weak, because it's just not a sustainable way to go. And most people, generally speaking, need around 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Usually, there are not many people that can function on 7 and less. I would like to think that I'm a relatively productive person. I know that less than 8 hours, I definitely feel it. Less than 7.5 hours, and I'm noticeably more tired. Less than 7 hours, and it's not a good time. And I can tell, and I've actually measured this objectively before, is that my productivity starts to creep down lower and lower and lower. So you want to make sure that sleep is something that you're really protecting. And if you're getting 5 hours at the moment and you're aiming for 8 hours, you need to just keep pushing towards increasing the amount of sleep, because that extra 3 hours of sleep could give you an additional 2 hours on top in terms of just efficiency, and it will give you a much better platform to build off of, rather than being this highly strung, sleep deprived, emotionally unstable entity that just kind of wanders the earth, creeping around studying, that's extremely fragile. We can't develop that into anything. There needs to be a solid platform, and sleep is one of the fundamental principles of that. So the other thing apart from sleep is that you want to actually spend time to remove distractions. So studies that are done on people that have typically high discipline and self-control versus people that have a low level of discipline and get easily distracted actually interestingly shows that from a neurological point of view, looking at studies of the brain and how the brain works, people with high discipline and self-control get just as easily distracted as anyone else. There isn't a big difference between the two. So why is it that one group of people is able to be highly productive and focused, while the other group gets distracted and spends 2 hours scrolling through social media and then regrets their life decisions? Why is that? The difference is that actually the people with self-control and discipline take time and effort before they need to focus to remove the distractions beforehand. So it's always better to remove the source of distraction than relying on self-control or willpower to overcome it. Some people have a mentality, and I used to have this mentality, that it's actually better to give yourself distractions so that you can train your brain to overcome the distractions. It's not entirely false that this is possible, but the thing is that you generally face enough distractions in normal life to be able to train that anyway. And there are actually some other ways of training your focus that are much faster and give you much better results than trying to do this when you actually need to get work done. Because when you do this, when you actually need to get work done, obviously the cost is that you are taking time away from the work you need to get done, which means that you might fall further behind, which increases your stress, which would actually reduce your focus, right? So that would be one of those spirals that you want to avoid. Instead, you want to make sure that you're taking your phone, putting it somewhere else in another room, give it to your mom or your dad, give it to your sibling. Okay, I don't know how your siblings are. Maybe don't give it to your sibling. Put it away, lock it away, have all the distractions that you might face away from you as much as possible. Be in an environment, if you can study at a library, if you can find a quiet time of the day at home or something like that. As much as you're able to control, you want to make sure that your environment is distraction-free, because spending 10, 15 minutes setting that up will easily be made up for in terms of how much more focused you are during it and reducing your distractions. And another thing that we can actually use to complement this is something called a distractions cheat sheet. So a distractions cheat sheet is just a piece of paper that you have next to you, and every time you get distracted, you just write down what it was that distracted you. And that means that next time you know to try to remove those distractions before you get into focus. And that means that over time, you get better and better at maintaining your environment to the point where there is just nothing to distract you anymore, and you can really focus in and get some work done. Combined with dedicated focus training, which I'll teach you later in the course, you'll be able to function optimally in any environment. And the final thing is in terms of how we use our breaks. So when it comes to taking breaks, we actually want to aim for a higher frequency, but a lower duration of breaks. So what this means is that instead of waiting for 1 or 2 hours before you really feel like you need to take a break, and then you take a 30-minute, 1 hour, 2 hour, all day, all week, all month break, instead, what we want to do is do 20 or 30 minutes, still feel relatively fresh, and then take a short 5 or 10-minute break. And it's better to actually have lots of breaks that are shorter than it is to take really long breaks after working for a really long time. And the reason is a little bit complicated, but it's because your brain works in such a way that it regains focus much more easily when there's a lot of reserve to work with. The other way of saying that is that when you wait until you're really out of energy completely, then it takes a much longer period of time to then recover all of that energy and feel like you're ready to work again. And so it's actually better to sort of top yourself up very frequently rather than to wait for a really long period of time. You can kind of think of this like if you were going for a run, you can actually run farther by running 100 meters, resting for 5 minutes, running 100 meters, resting for 5 minutes, running 100 meters, resting for 5 minutes, rather than running for 30 minutes to 40 minutes, and then you have to rest for the next 4 hours before you can run for the next 30 or 40 minutes again. So our ability to recover is much faster when we're already higher in energy. And again, energy is a big component of what creates good focus. So we want to be high energy for the rest of the day. We don't want to be high energy in the morning, and then by 12 p.m., we have no energy, and by 3 p.m., we wonder how we're still alive, and by 6 p.m., we're walking dead. And then for the rest of the entire term, you are walking dead. We don't want that. We want to be high energy for most of the day until we get to a nice natural state of being tired and productive at night where we get a good night's sleep, and then we repeat that day after day, and we can maintain a steadily high level of productivity. And the 5 or 10 minutes that you spend on resting a little bit more frequently, again, you make up for that by being more efficient. So time your breaks. If you feel like you only need 5 minutes, set a 5-minute timer. If you feel like you need 10 minutes, set a 10-minute timer. And if you're taking your breaks often enough, you probably don't need more than 15 minutes. So here, the tip is use a timer. A lot of people, even though I say this, won't use a timer. For you, definitely use a timer, because otherwise you'll find that your 10-minute break ends up being a 10-hour break. And would go in 5, 10, or 15-minute intervals. And again, I'm actually going to touch on this, all of this, later in the course with more advanced versions that are much more efficient than this basic general advice that I'm giving now. But again, you need to have a little bit of experience and practice using just this general advice before we do any of the other stuff, because otherwise we're going to be climbing too quickly and you're just going to find it too overwhelming and hard to work with. So let's just get really good at doing this first before we move on.